Oh gosh, this is amazing. Thank you folks so much for coming today. My name is Matt Gundrum. I'm the producer for Hmonglish, and it is just such an honor and a privilege to produce a show for Chef Vang. It's been such an incredible ride to work with this dude, and I mean, just his ascendance with all the different things he's doing has been extremely humbling. Him and I first met when I was doing a humble little show on Jazz 88. I had a bit of like a foodie radio show, and that was the first time him and I met back in 2018, 2019, and ever since then we've become really close. And again, I was very fortunate enough that he tapped me to produce his podcast Hmonglish after that. And so we brought him today, and we brought a guest, Mr. Ming Jing Tong. He is a intercultural coach. If anyone has listened to Hmonglish, he was on season 2, episode 1. Super eloquent, fantastic, intelligent guy. He's an intercultural coach, and he helps people break down and dissect culture in really fascinating ways. And in honor of AAPI Heritage Month, we brought these two guys together to discuss everything related to Asian culture and beyond, and what it means to have dual culture belonging to two different identities, cultural identities. And these guys are going to have a lot to say, a lot of serious things, a lot of funny things. I mean, these guys go way back. They're good friends. So they're kind of just here to hang out, talk, and there just happens to be an audience, which is like how we usually do it on Hmonglish. So I'll let you guys take it away then, huh?
All right. Thanks, Matt. Matt has been an incredible friend, and he also has been an incredible producer. If I was to do this myself, it would literally be over a MacBook with like the microphone that comes with the MacBook too, you know what I'm saying? That's in there. So he has given us legitimacy. He has made us sound great, beautiful, and put together some really incredible clips and videos. And so we've been very, very blessed to have him. I'm not sure if you guys are regular listeners or not, but the way that we got the word Hmonglish was just this idea. It started out as kids. We would speak Hmong to our parents, but then we would hit words like computer or calculator, and they'd be like, and you would say in Hmong like, "Nia dup be school," like school. There's no word for school, or there is a word for school, but it's kind of rough. So it's like, "Nia be school hagapi yo ilu computer." Like, Mom, at school they've asked us to see if we can buy a computer, and it was just like da 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 computer, da da calculator, and so we as kids would joke about how we would speak Hmonglish, we would speak Hmong, but then in times we would interject English words into it. And what's really interesting too is the word Mika, which is our current pop-up that's in this space, it's the Hmong word for American. Our parents couldn't say Mika, or they couldn't say American, so they would say Mika. And that was kind of like the code word for us Hmong kids to understand, like, oh, it's, they're talking about American, and so Hmonglish came out of that. It was always kind of like a little funny haha joke. And then it became this little podcast that, grew to 3 full episodes, or 3 full seasons, 3 full seasons. Yes. So it's 3 full episodes. It all meshes up into one, okay? And I call them like Netflix seasons, how there's like 6 episodes in a season, So yeah. So I've always asked this question of like, where do I belong, right? I believe that as people, as human, intrinsically, we are created for community. We have been created to always ask that question of like, where do I belong? We're always looking for community. Even when we think like, I'm going to go into the woods and live alone and da-da-da-da, you could totally do that. But inside, there's a cry of our hearts to be a part of a community. And so in doing that, this is kind of what sparked Hmonglish, because I went through a lot of just growing up with all these questions that it was hard for my parents to answer, because, they were Hmong. They grew up in the mountains of Laos. They grew up during war. And when I started talking about these things, other Hmong kids that were my age like, I call us elder millennials. Very, very differentiated.
I'm Gen X, dude.
Yeah. Dude, I identify as a boomer, though. I love yelling at kids.
My wallet would like to identify as a boomer.
Yeah, I love just yelling at kids and telling them to get a job when I see them biking by. Get a job, you hooligans! Yeah, the Great War is coming. No, and so I just started connecting with all these other Hmong millennials who are like, dude, I've asked myself those questions. That's some of the desires in my heart, and we kind of found this little community together talking about it. And in that, Tong and I have been friends for what, 10 years?
Like 10, yeah.
10, yeah.
I think exactly 10 now.
Yeah, dude.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know, like exactly 10.
Yeah, thank you.
But like when I first met you, Pearl was what? Pearl, where's
0.
Pearl? She was a baby.
She was a baby.
Yeah. Now she's like an adult,
Very
and
much.
I have full conversations with her. And it's like, whoa, that's like
2 and even 3 syllable words.
Yes, bigger words that I use. And so Tong's family has always welcomed me into their home. And kind of a fun fact, we made up the name Union Kitchen or Union Hmong Kitchen at his dinner table. And because here's the like real story behind it, because everyone always thinks of it and they're like, oh man, it's so cool. Blah, blah. No, here's the real story. It was literally us going, or where I think Mecca Boss was writing an article and she said on City Pages, and she said, hey, what's the name of your pop-up? And I'm like, let me get back to you, because we didn't have a name at that time. And I'm like, dude, this food writer wants a name, so we got to figure this out. And I think we were both kind of like laughing at each other, and we're like at your dinner table, and you said something along the lines of like, well, food unites people together. And I'm like, yeah, so it's like a kitchen, and like people unite together. And then you said, what, Union Kitchen? And we both laughed really hard, and we're like, and then we like looked at each other. We're like, yeah, let's go with that.
The lights dimmed, the smoke came up.
Yeah. And it was more like, yeah, let's go with that.
It just a power out, and I burned the dinner.
Yeah. It was it. So, yeah. So we've always been friends. We have these late night times where we go out and eat and stuff, and we talk about life, we talk about culture, and all these things. And so it's a very trusted friend, a very close friend. And I think one of the best encouragers I've ever had, where there are times where, I feel like I don't want to do all of this anymore. And he, in those moments, will come along and say, hey, like, I want to encourage you. I want to tell you, keep going. So I'm just always glad to have a platform with Tong. So.
I'm not Hmong, but
Yeah.
the Asian American experience so similar. So I'm Chinese, and little sister is Mei. That's 4th tone, Mei. And then the word for not yet is Hai Mei. Okay, you hear what that sounds like, right? So my dad asked my brother, hey, is the heater on yet? He goes, Hai Mei. And my sister overhears, he goes, hi. This is the Asian American experience. This is that Hmonglish, we call it Chinglish, right? And the language itself is like a microcosmic example of what it is to be bicultural, to have a mishmash of languages in your mind, and to be a mishmash of cultures in the world. So there's that connection there.
Yeah, absolutely.
Can we go actually back to, I want to go all the way back to before February 2016. So we used to talk a lot about this idea. What's February 2016?
Don't know.
The Genesis.
Oh, shoot. Yeah.
Genesis
Our
1:1,
first
right?
Yeah. Our first pop-up. Yeah.
In the beginning was the pop-up.
Yeah, it was.
And before that time, we talked a lot about food plus people equals community. And you just gave us that story. That's how the idea of, so the union is no less than the union of individuals coming together to share a meal. You used to always say, food is the great
equalizer.
Yeah. So, you mind if I just kick off with this question here? So, this is something that, this I'm going to take us back to a conversation that we had from the beginning. So,
how's your memory so good, dude?
I
have to delete some stuff to be able to put more stuff in.
There's so much empty space up here, and it's like knocking around. I'm making portmanteaus.
It's like when you tell me these things, and I'm like, oh man, I'm like the old school like gateway computers. like for you know what I'm talking about, and it's like all the RAM spaces are full, and it's just like, oh man, I can't put any more RAM space, so I just got to delete things.
I mull on things, you know.
Yeah.
10 years later, I come to conclusions.
Oh man.
So it was then 7 years ago, we had put together the Union Kitchen website. It was Union Kitchen. It wasn't Union Hmong Kitchen. Okay.
Because I didn't want people to know that we were Hmong, because I was always afraid that if they knew that we were Hmong, they'd be like, oh, what's that? Like, should I come down? So I wanted to have this ambiguous name where it's like, you know, when people would come and be like, oh, okay, cool. Like, this is just a restaurant, you know?
Yeah.
Yep.
So the first pop-up was announced, and then what I recall was there started to be some press. And even the very first night of the pop-up, the line, it was February.
Yeah, it was cold.
And it was
That
freezing
heater's
cold.
outside.
And the line was down the block, and people were coming in frozen.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a big night. I remember, well, I have pictures. And there was, I was just talking with Marshall about this. There came then to be an unexpected word. So it was what I'm now calling a glaring addition. And the glaring addition was that this was not Chef Yia Vang's place, but that this was Hmong Chef Yia Vang's place.
Yeah.
Do you remember that conversation?
Yep.
Well, tell me what you remember from it.
Yeah, I mean, we had that conversation, and right away I was like, well, okay, I get it. You know, they need a qualifier, so, you know, I get that. I'm not mad at that. But then it became kind of eventually, we became the Asian / Hmong food.
Hmong emissary, city pages.
Yeah.
January 2017.
I didn't even know what the word emissary was. I had to like Google it. I'm like, oh yeah, okay. I'm like, what's a?
So I feel like the stuff that comes out of the back of your car, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So I know that they did that in. It wasn't a malice thing. I totally get it. It wasn't. Yep. But I also there became this like bug inside of me where I'm like, okay, so like if we made a burger, they'll be like, yeah, but stick to Asian food or stick to Hmong food, you know? Yeah. And so there was this kind of thing where it's like, well, I'll stick to this because I guess this is what we know, you know? And yeah, it became this big conversation that we would always talk about.
I don't know if I ever said this directly to you. I probably said this indirectly to you, like a good Asian American. Mm-hmm. It bothered me. So this, if I could think back to why the unexpected addition of Hmong, the qualifier on top of the name chef, right? You couldn't just be Chef Yia Vang. You had to at all times be Hmong Chef Yia Vang. And I think what bothered me about it at that time was you had a very strong and very clear message. And it was, food is the great equalizer. When we come together and eat, it doesn't matter how much you make. It doesn't matter where you live, what you drove to get to this dinner table. When we sit down, we will become as one through that food. And that message, which was in the original copy from the original website, it seemed not to be noticed at all. But what did seem to be picked up was, hey, you look Asian.
Yeah.
What kind of Asian are you? Mm-hmm. And now we've got a story because he's Asian, not the story that you wanted to tell.
Yeah, because I think, I don't know, I get conflicted, right? Because like sometimes it's like the way you look kind of gets you invited to the stage, you know, because right away it's like we have these things that we need to fill out. Like we need these stories to fill out with these different stories, you know, whatever. And then it's like you get there and then like, what do? Like you could get angry and be like, look, you know, I know why I'm here, you know, or you can say, hey, I'm like, regardless on how I got here, now when I get here, we can tell our story. So I think that right away, this idea for me was, you know, that food is this great equalizer. It's like this thing where it's like, you know, I would just say that you ever sit at a table and the table legs aren't right or your chair isn't right and it's wobbly, you know? IKEA, okay? So we're balling on a budget. But anyways, anytime you do that,
Shims.
Yeah. Anytime you do that, it just doesn't feel right? But there's just something to just the idea, the beauty of the chair is perfect, the table is perfect, doesn't move, and it's equal. Everyone gets to sit at it. And I think that part of me, and I don't think I've ever said this to you, but I think that part of me was I was just so afraid of being that 10-year-old boy in elementary school again, when the kids would come and take my eyes and they would open it up and then they would ask me if I could see better since, my eyes weren't so squinty anymore. So I was still, at that point, I was like, I don't know, like 30 or something. I don't know, not even like, 29, 30. And I would always be so afraid that if I put myself out there, then my fellow chefs and cooks would be like, well, why you? Like, tell us why you deserve this. So I guess, like, for me was the easier route was, let's just talk about equality. Let's talk about how food brings us together. How so there's a part of me that was that avoidance. It wasn't the embrace of being Hmong. It was the kind of like, well, if I focus a lot on this idea that food is this commonality that we all can come together and eat together and be one, maybe they forget that I'm Hmong. And maybe we don't talk about that part, And so that's how it started. As I look back on it, that's really how it started. But in doing that, I realized, that you can't talk about how food is the ultimate equalizer that brings us all together if we don't individually talk about where we come from. And that's, like, you can't talk about this just so that you can try to hide this. Like, both have to be in the light.
There was a very significant turning point. I remember, I actually searched my text messages today to see if I could find it. Couldn't find it.
No, this is a long. Don't they delete it after a year?
I don't know.
It's after a year. It gets deleted.
Steve Jobs is still reading all my texts.
Yes, he is.
The beyond.
His brain is.
Yes.
That's like in a bag somewhere.
When I remember the discussion was, are we going to say, no, that I'm not getting on that train. I'm not going to be the Hmong chef. Like, why can't I just be a chef? Every other majority culture participants, just they're not. There's no other qualifier, right? There's no hyphenation in their title. And I mean that there was a time when we were talking through that, and you, I guess you just did describe the internal part of it. But you had to make a pretty difficult decision to say, I'm gonna roll with this.
Yeah, definitely. It was that choice where it's like, I'm gonna roll with this. Man, I really, as an adult now, like 38 years old, I really can qualify that a lot of my characteristics, the way that my heart works, stems from my father. My dad fought for this country. He fought in this big war that happened in northern Laos, and the war was so secret that literally the war is called the Secret War. And after he was done, they promised, there's a safe passage to America, but then it was denied. They lived in a refugee camp for 10 years after, and eventually they came to America. And when they got to America, people still yelled at him to get back to his country, even though he fought for a country that they never knew about, that he fought for a country that he was, that he never stepped on. And I don't think I've ever heard him once, like, denounce America. I don't think he's ever heard him once go, I can't believe this country treated us like this or me like this. Yeah. He has never once said that. Yeah. He's always been so thankful for any opportunity he's gotten. He's always so thankful for any opportunities he's set up for us, And so I think that part of me, I get that from him. Because you can sit here and be angry and be like, the only reason they want us here is because, they get to check off that Hmong thing because, Hmong, there's a big, large Hmong population in the Twin Cities. My father taught us that stuff doesn't matter. But when you get there, show them what you're made of, And for me, that was the greatest thing he instilled in me. And it also gave me the no fear kind of thing. We talked about this, that idea that
I wore that brand in the 90s. I remember.
Yeah, no fear. Oh yeah, I forgot about that.
Still wear it.
Yeah. It's that idea where it's like our love for adventure, overcomes our fear of the unknown. And so it is that idea that it's like, man, I don't know what's going to happen next,
Yeah.
but I love adventure so much that the fear, how do you battle fear with love?
Yeah.
Love of the,
I feel like let me. I'm gonna go 360 on this all the way around, or maybe 180 is the proper degrees here. At the time, I remember thinking this qualifier is unfair.
Mm-hmm.
There's a way in which you will become pigeonholed because the foods that we enjoyed together.
Mm-hmm.
You made chicken tikka masala. You taught
Oh,
me
yeah.
tzatziki. Amazing burgers in my house. None of it was Hmong, right?
Mm-hmm.
And at the time, I felt like, man, if we label him with a mono-ethnic label,
Mm-hmm.
we reduce him to a mono-ethnic creator, artist. And the world loses out on the best burger in the Twin Cities, by the way. Okay?
Every burger we sell, he gets a nickel, okay? That's the truth. Now, I'm going to tell you the truth. No.
It was a dime before, but
Yeah. Beef prices, man. So that's why we went back to a nickel. He's got like at least a full $1 now.
But so if perhaps a majority culture member gets a pass as chef, chef XYZ, it almost is like there is this neutralized pass that you get to have. So because you don't have a mono-ethnic label qualifying your title as chef, you are now able to say, you know what really inspires me? I traveled to such and such a country last year, and that's the kind of restaurant I'm going to open now.
Yep.
In these Twin Cities. I was so inspired by Island X, and I'm going to open an ethnically Island X
Yeah,
place.
so you're kind of talking about the idea where I think that, in the restaurant world, in the food world, where this is one of the biggest questions, right? Is it okay for a white chef here who goes and let's just say he has a great experience, great time down in Oaxaca and says, look, when I come back, I'm so inspired by this that I can open that I want to open a Oaxacan restaurant, and I've learned by making these connections down there, and that's what I want to do. And your question is, well, is that okay? Yeah. Right.
Or what even are the questions around that, right? So I think the category that we're in now, some could call it, on the negative side, appropriation, right? I'm going to take that and strip it of its people, but make the tenets of it my own, the recipes my own, and it becomes my creation in the Twin Cities or wherever I am located, and I'm going to do something with it. So the negative way to view that would be appropriation, right? And we've talked about another perspective on that same activity, and that would be celebration, right? So there is a way in which you could help the Twin Cities celebrate the American cheeseburger in a way that they've never done before.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that I think about is this, and I think that there's just always two routes, right? There's the trend route. What is the trend right now? I think that everybody from every culture falls to this. What is the trend? Somebody sets up a trend. In that trend, there is money to be made. So it's like that whole idea of like this trend works, and on paper it kills and making money. This is great. I mean, there's that route. Totally, do it. Do your thing. And then there's that route. There's another route too, where it's just like, but what we really want to do is we want to speaks to the soul of people, right? So, for example, this is kind of the thing I think about. What we do here, what we do at Hilltribe, what we do with our food, is nothing special. Here's the deal. Here's why. Because how we make our food, let's just say we start a fire, we put out. We put out a little grill, and then we grill pork over the fire. A couple months ago, I was very blessed to go into Laos. I got the chance to go up to the northern Laos, into the mountains of Laos, to go into these old school, Hmong villages up there. And when I say old school Hmong villages, I'm talking about the technology in these villages are barely past the Bronze Ages, right? And they're doing everything exactly the same that we're doing here. And so it's not like I reinvented, or it's not like we, as Hilltribe, Union Hmong Kitchen, V9, whatever you want to call us, it's not like we reinvented grilling meats, Before the dawn of time, people were doing that, right? So it's nothing special, right? There was a big trend where it's always wood fire grill, right? Restaurants were dropping like $50 to $60 to even like $100,000 extra on their budget for building out kitchens so they can do wood fire grill, right? Because that stuff's really expensive. And it was like, we want to be authentic, blah, 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 whatever, okay?
There's a word right there.
Yeah, there's another word. Yep. But here's the deal. So for me, it's this. I'm going to tell you why grilling pork over a wood fire grill means so much to me. See, I was this kid who grew up, and in the Hmong culture, what we do is as the boys, you would go stand beside your dad and your uncles outside, and when they were having a party, they would take the fire pit and they would turn it into a grill, and then they would put a rack on top of it, and then you, as one of the kids, you felt like one of the guys, right? You're one of the guys because you would get to stand there. And then they would take that piece of meat and they grill it right on top. And as they're grilling it, they're going to talk and they're going to, kind of like poke fun at each other and whatever. But then you get to join in too a little bit. And then when they flip that piece of meat and when they get to that point where they're like, hey, let's check to see if it's ready or not. They pull it out and they have a cutting board and they all slice it. And if you were the really special, you get to stand by your dad or your uncles and they will hand you a piece. That's the piece. That's like the cook's piece, the griller's piece, where it's like we're checking together. And if you were super, super special and super, super lucky, your dad would hand you the tong and it would be your turn to take over a section of that grill. And so for me, I lived for that moment. I remember I was like 12 years old and my father said to me, hey, you watch this section. This is your section. And he handed me the tongs and I felt like the heavens opened. There was a light. And in my mind, I thought to myself, you trained your whole life for this. Don't mess it up. And I remember I was about to go flip a meat and my uncle's like, oh, hold on. And he said to me, he said, listen carefully. You have to listen to the sizzle of the fat, and you have to see how that's cooking. And as it drips, watch how it drips into the embers, and when the embers hit, that smoke that comes up, it kisses the meat, and it gives it that extra taste. And then he said, you would have to watch that, and be careful when you turn it, because you don't want the hot spot, because you don't want to burn, because you don't want that bitter. And my father came back, and he would show me, and I felt like $1 million that night. When I went inside and after we were done, and I remember I went in my house and I smelled like one of the guys. I smelled like barbecue. I smelled like, that campfire smoke. And I remember I didn't want to wash my clothes in fear that scent would go away, because when that scent went away, I wasn't one of the guys anymore. I didn't belong anymore, right? So then when I watch some of our chefs and they're grilling and they're just flipping in, they're just like, oh, whatever, my heart breaks. Because to me, that's so special. Because here's the other thing you don't know about me. Is like growing up, my father never wanted me to be a cook. He never wanted me to work in this industry. You know what he said to me? He said, yeah, I work really hard. I break my back. My hands hurt. You know why? Because you don't have to do it. I will take all that pain. So that he would always say, and when we would drive into a city and there's like a big building, he would say, you see that building? I want you to work in a building like that, in that corner office. And I want you to sign checks for the people who work for you, and I want you to tell them what they do, because that's what the life I want for you. And then my father would say to me, he would say, don't be like me. He would always say, that means I'm dumb. I'm irregular. I'm silly. I don't know anything. I don't know the ways of this world, how it works in here. You do. Don't be like me. See, when I grill or when I'm outside and it's a long day and my knee's hurting and I get back to my house and I'm either sitting in the shower or I'm just like sitting in my car and I haven't started the engine yet to go home, I sit there. I love the way I feel because it's the closest I feel to my Father. See, do you know why this stuff means so much to me? Because every time I light, and this is so silly, but every time we light up some coal to grill some meat, it's just not lighting up some coal to grill up some meat. Like, every time I do that, I'm a step closer to being like him. He's my hero. He's a warrior. He fought for me. He laid his life down for me to be here. So it's as silly as when people tell me, oh man, like this is a great trend. Like, grilling, that's a great trend, right? It's not a trend for me. This is literally life for me. That when my hand has soot on it, I take forever to wash my hands with soot on it because it's the same hand my Father has, So I find myself going, this is what it means to me. That if you want to know this story, sure, I don't give a crap. Call me the Hmong chef, whatever, But when I get on that table, when we get on that stage, we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about, hey, white chef dude who goes to Oaxaca who, is inspired. You come back, you better freaking celebrate this. Yeah. This better be in your soul. You better war for it. You better fight for it. You better know why you're doing it. Because if anything else, and you're making profit off of it, then that's not celebration, right? Yeah. So to me, that's what it means. To me, to get there, and I don't care what they call me, but when we get there, I'm going to tell them the story. Like, here's the thing. There's a lot of young chefs coming through. They'll outcook me. I know it. I'm okay with it, But they're not going to tell our story better. Yeah.
All of that is beautiful. And what's beautiful about it is the articulation of culture. And it's just rich and thick with culture. So at the end of the day, to want the removal of an ethnic label from the chef title is going the wrong way. What if it was not the removal of Hmong, but the exploration of majority culture members of where are you from and who are you and who are your people? What if it's not the deletion of a cultural title, but the unexpected broad addition of our heritage? That the food we make or even the people we are did not start with us. Mm-hmm. So there is this thing where you are near generationally to where you're from. And as am I. My parents are from Taiwan, right? I was born here. And the further and further away, I've got my two of my three kids here. The further and further away a person's life experience is from where their heritage began, the more we tend to gravitate toward, I'm just American. Instead of taking the time to think, at what point did my lineage arrive to this place? And to be able to be close to it, to feel the passion, and to be informed in our identity the way that Hmongness informs your identity, I think is far more desirable than saying, hey, why can't you just be Chef Vang? It's not, why does he have to be Chef Vang? Or why does he have to be Hmong Chef Vang? But I am so glad that we get to have a Hmong Chef Vang, and I want people to dive deep into their heritage to understand the culture that they've come from.
Yeah, was one of those things where it's like, I don't know. It's one of those things I always think about where it's like, okay, if you want to know about my Hmongness, I'm gonna go deep into it, but don't expect a 30-second elevator pitch on it, And so I think that one of the things that I love is my mom. always talks about this desire for us, her children, and she says, my desire for my children is not to just be leaders in your community, but leader in the community, leaders beyond the community. And it was one of those things where, we grew up in the church, so she's always saying, she has this women's prayer group every morning at 5. It's all these women from around the world, Hmong women from around the world, and they pray together. She always says, we pray on FaceTime. It's so funny when you hear my mom talking, like FaceTime. I'm like, whoa.
She speaks Hmonglish.
Yeah, I was like, whoa. Like, there's no Hmong word for FaceTime. She always talks about FaceTime, and and they do these. And she said that one of our dreams, as these group of women from around the world is praying together, is that we want to see our sons and daughters not only be leaders in our Hmong community, but beyond the Hmong community. And it's been something where I've held really close to my heart. I think we, like, for example, we came to this country as refugees, right? So I think we talked about this. What's the difference between a refugee and an immigrant? And it's two very different things, like an immigrant is somebody who chooses to come to this country, A refugee comes out of war, out of distress, out of we need to live, we need safety. And it's two different things, It's not a right or wrong, it's just two different things.
Very different realities that drive the emigration.
Yep. And so the hardest thing for Hmong kids, and especially the Gen Z Hmong kids, is they have parents who came here as refugees. So the mentality is still that refugee mentality. So you're waiting for the white culture to dub you worthy. You're waiting for the white culture to come knock on your door, and say, hey, we have this for you, But it's incredible that in what I love speaking, and this is my Hmongness, is what I love speaking to young Hmong kids about this. And I say, hey guys, and especially when I go to schools, this is the best thing. Is and even though it's a mixed group of community, I'm like, I love just directing to the Hmong, all my little Hmong brothers and sisters, the little nieces and nephews, I would always say, is I'm like, listen, I'm going to tell you guys something, and then everybody gets to listen in, right? And I love telling them, I'm like, I'm going to tell you about your grandfather and your fathers and how they fought this war. How when they fought this war, people didn't think that they were going to survive, but they survived. We were the forgotten people in the mountains of Laos. Even the word Hilltribe or Mokbachua, literally it was a derogatory term towards the people who lived in the mountains because they were considered less than and they were considered dirty. But when the CIA came in and said, we need a paramilitary troop to fight this war for us, who did they go to? They didn't go to the lowland people. They went to the mountain people, our people. They fought this war, and they fought bravely, and they died bravely for it. And then on top of it, they had to go live in these, internment camps, in these refugee camps. And after they were done, they came to America and they had to learn the language, and they worked hard, and in hopes that their children, you guys, have a future. And I get to say, you should never have to apologize, or you should never have to worry of can I do this? Because they did it all for you. It's been done. And I always love telling this to them, because the same blood that pumped through their veins while they fought as warriors is the same blood that pumps through your vein. It's the same blood in your heart. So don't you ever think, when I'm talking to these young Hmong kids, don't you ever think that I can't do it. I'm not built for this. There's a Hmong word, bano, which means we're silly, we're worthless. Don't you ever think that, because all you have to do is look at your parents and your grandparents, and for me, that's what I think about a lot. A lot of people have asked, said, oh, it's so great, you have so much strength in you, and I'm like, I actually don't. I don't. I know where I am in my weakest, but what I do have, and I know where I come from and who I am, is what they have done, and everything, and everything that they've done.
As you think about the next generation, you share these stories not for entertainment, but for fortification, right? As you look out into the future for your nieces and nephews, what are the struggles that you can foresee them having?
Yeah, I feel old saying this. And this is just for kids and Joe. See, this is the boomer side of me coming out. It's just kids and Joe. They don't know what hard work is. I think one of the things is the longer they're removed from the story, for me, it's
that generational distance.
Man, for me, it's my parents, So when my mother When my mom told me that, so my mom at a very young age had her kids, right? But her first husband passed because he was killed. They were ambushed. He was killed, while they were trying to escape. All the men were ambushed, and all the women and children had to go hiding in these caves. And my brother, half brother, I don't really care. I just call him my brother. He was a baby, a newborn, and he would cry and cry and cry. And this is not something that was uncommon. It was common to do this. Is then they would take opium and they would drug the baby so that the baby wouldn't cry anymore, right?
Give away the location.
Yep. To
wind up in the death of the whole family.
Yep. So it's either that or you take the baby and you just like the group will leave the baby behind. So you had two choices. They weren't great choices, but you had to do it. But the only chance for your baby, and some of you guys are moms in here, moms are supposed to protect their babies, right? That is innate in you as a mother. You protect your babies. You never harm your babies. You never purposely drug your baby. But it had to be done. And they did it to my brother, and mom said they were so scared because he wouldn't wake up. But he was quiet, but he wouldn't wake up. And they were afraid that they might have killed him. And that was the reality she had to accept. Eventually, he woke up. And now my brother has, his mental capacity isn't past a third grader. He has cognitive disabilities. His hands. He's autistic, but he's a 45-year-old dude. Almost 45 years ago, my mom had to make a decision, and she lives with that, right? I'm still connected to that. I think about that, But I think of some of my nieces and nephew, how they're kind of far removed from that. And I think that that's one of the struggles I see, is that removal from that pain, that hurt. And it's like, what do I do? Do we talk to my nieces and nephew about that? Do we talk to, the younger generation about that? I don't want to like scare them straight or anything. Like, that's not what I want to do. But I hope that there's somehow some connection that still happens. And I think that's the same thing. The language. My nieces and nephew don't speak Hmong, so my parents can't communicate with them. And my mom cried once, we were talking about it, and she says, "These are my children. They're beautiful, and I can't communicate with them. They won't talk to me."
Yeah, and those are difficult realities. I think that a lot of immigrant and refugee generationally are going to continue to face, right? Losing, you come here to save your family, you wind up saving them physically, but you lose them.
And that's the choice.
Linguistically.
Yeah, but that's the choice, right? There's no perfect system, right? Yeah. But that's the choice. Yeah. It's interesting though. This is the thing I love though, right? The food. Hmong food, Hmong kids, like my little nephew Luki, he's like 4 or 5. Oh shoot, I think he's 6 now. Maybe 7. I don't know. He's having full conversation.
He's been 4 for 3 years.
Yeah. I don't know. He thinks he always tells everyone, "You're my favorite uncle because I see you on YouTube." I'm like, okay, a really low bar. I was like, wait, that's all? He's like, yeah, and then TV. I tell my friend you're on TV. I'm like, anyways, what he loves to eat in the morning: rice, sausage, and eggs. That is such a traditional morning Hmong dish, but he loves it. He doesn't ask for cereal or Pop-Tart or blah, 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 whatever. Yeah. That's what he asked for. So
there's still a generational connection that your parents can have with their grandkids through the food.
Absolutely. You know what his favorite thing is? Grandma's egg rolls. He'll ask for those, and he loves it.
So what does he call them?
This is egg rolls,
Okay.
Yeah. Gayo, which is egg rolls.
So it's lost, but it's not lost.
No, that's the interesting thing, is the food still connects us.
Yeah,
it's incredible. You watch these young kids and they still the desire. It's like something inside of us, like our quotzal, our pepper sauce with braised mustard green and pork and chicken and rice. I mean, that's the stuff they eat and they love it. Yeah. It's not like, hey, let's get pizza, let's get burgers, whatever. That's the stuff they love, which is incredible to me because that's where I feel that it's like this burden to make sure that we keep that. It's this burden for me to make sure that we, that we get to pass that down.
I would say and I've said this and thought this many times before, just a little bit introspective of myself now. I would say, though I'm fluent in Mandarin, I speak 100% in Mandarin with my parents. Lived in Taiwan for a year, learned a lot of words that adults use. Not those words.
Yeah,
Words like
guys.
government and even though.
Words like poop.
Yeah. I would say because of the language barrier, even though I was raised speaking Mandarin and still speak Mandarin, to this day, I have never had a real conversation with my parents because we can talk about how do you like the rice or the beef, etc. But I cannot talk to them. In other words, my parents, they hardly know me at all. They don't know because I exist here. I exist in this tongue. I don't exist, I don't know if any of you are multilingual. When you speak a different language, you are a different person.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I am about 3 or 4 different people because I speak 3 or 4 languages. And that is just a part of what it means to be a bicultural person, not just Asian, but a multicultural person is multicultural in themselves, multi-personal in themselves. I don't even know where I was going with that, but just a connection.
No, I totally get that. And that's why I think it kind of goes back to kind of my previous thoughts on like, but here's the deal, dude. I mean, I've heard you speak many times on different dishes that you grew up with, and it's still like instilled in you. And you would explain to me the flavors, and you're like, no, but it has this here.
For sure.
Yeah, but I think that's why, like for me, I think like that's why food is so important. Like food doesn't get lost in that, even though the language, the little language is lost. That's why I believe that food is the ultimate connector, and I believe like food is a universal language that brings us together. And that's why like even being able to share like the dishes, like last night we had a big dinner here. It's like 40 some people, and my idea or my thought has always been you don't really truly get immersed and understand Hmong food unless you're at a Hmong house and Hmong parents are cooking for you. In our restaurants, we have to logistically do some different things because at the end of the day we're a business, right? And so logistically we have to do a couple different things. But if you want to remove that business aspect out of it, you have to be in a Hmong house. There's all these little nuances that you miss, For example, when you come to eat at my mom and dad's house, they will never, ever make you a plate. They will give you a plate and you're invited to the table. They will never, ever tell you, oh, by the way, there's 10 of us, there's 10 pieces, or everybody just gets one. They would never do that. There would be no limitations on that. Because when you're invited to the table, it's abundant, right? I always tell this story, how my dad used to say to us, when you say this is mine, you have less. When you say this is ours, you have more. And that's what he would always say to us when we would be like, well, there's one piece less. It's not fair. So-and-so gets it. And he would be like, why are you guys arguing about that? That you're arguing about that one piece, that you've missed the fact that you can sit at a table together, And so that's why I believe that food is that universal language. And when we were doing that dinner last night, it was incredible to watch everybody just eat together. A lot of them were strangers and they just ate together. And when I thought about this, I was like, wow. Gustavo Romero, who's a good buddy of mine, he owns Nixta and their restaurant Oro, which go check it out, please. Gustavo was there, and Gustavo's Mexican, dude. So here's the deal: like he's eating there, and he's eating like the most quote unquote traditional, authentic Hmong food that there is, and he's hauling it down. And I went back and I said hi to him, and he's like, bro. Like, I know I'm not Hmong, but I feel so Hmong right now, And he goes, this stuff that you're eating, and stuff that that we're eating, yeah. He was saying something along the lines of like, this isn't Mexican food that I grew up with, but I feel like I feel Hmong and I feel truly Mexican too eating this. That to me is like what's the power of food,
cross-cultural connection.
Absolutely. So like, how could Gustavo be sitting here eating Hmong food? Literally, if you look at how the world has happened, it's it's literally on the other side of the world, right? Yeah. And he's still feeling completely Mexican. He's like, I feel like I'm in my, mom's house eating a dinner like this. And that's why I say that to truly immerse yourself in Hmong food, you can't do it at a restaurant. The restaurant, we can help you, kind of, start there. But if you truly want to, you have to go into a Hmong house, and that's why I believe that again, even though the food is completely different, the language is different. My parents don't speak Spanish. They don't speak English. They speak Hmong. He speaks Spanish. He speaks English. Like, even though they would be looking at each other and be like, but the food, that's like connects.
Yeah, let me tell you what I see in that event there. We, during, it must have been a year ago when we were brainstorming mission, vision, values for Hilltribe. And the mission we landed on, I'm not sure if you've changed it since then. I haven't looked at the document in a while.
We didn't.
But the mission of Hilltribe is to offer the welcome of a Hmong home to the world. And that's what you did here last night. And that, I think, is what Gustavo felt.
Yeah, and it wasn't until like this morning when I was driving back to the building here, to the Hilltribe building, and it clicked to me, because my fear is this. So we're opening Vinai, it's a new restaurant. It's been in the works for many years. Been kind of an up and down struggle with it. And my fear is that like people will be like, well, what's the difference between this and Union Hmong Kitchen? What's the difference between this and all the other things you've done? Are you now just having a building? Like, what's the difference? And I was always really nervous to answer that question. I mean, I know how to answer it. I know where my heart is. But I think visually, I saw it last night with Gustavo.
It's good.
Going like, we want to create a space where people come in and they can feel that welcome. Yeah. And to know that I'm eating here and I'm from a different world and it speaks a different language. But when I'm eating here, it takes me back to my world. Yeah. It speaks that language of care, and I sometimes don't like the word hospitality because it gets thrown out a lot. Sure. Hospitality, but like the true core of what that word is.
Let's go back to the etymology, right?
Yep.
Love of strangers.
Hospitality.
Yep.
And I love, remember when you told me that, I love how that's breaking down. Yeah. It's the love of strangers.
It's the opposite of xenophobia, philoxenia, loving strangers, loving the outsider. Mm-hmm.
So as we kind of like start wrapping up, think of your questions if you want to.
Oh, we're going to have open mic time for questions.
Yeah, we're going to have a little open mic time. Is there any last thing you want to say before we start knocking out some questions? And if you guys don't have any questions, then you're just going to hear us.
Yeah, folks, I forgot to add that we're definitely doing a Q&A, but if you guys have anything else to add
I don't have a last thing.
Yeah.
I don't have a last thing.
Nothing
Cool.
else to wrap
Q&A.
up? You want to start with questions, guys?
Do you want to?
Let's do it.
I'm down to start with questions. So, yeah, I will walk around with this handy-dandy wireless mic, and if anyone has any questions for our two esteemed gentlemen.
Thank you, guys.
Yeah, let's give them a round of applause first.
The longer you hang out with Tong, the more you realize the dad jokes he does. So when you said esteemed gentleman, I'd literally be like, I like to be roasted. And then I'm like, oh, dang. I'm like, oh, man.
You can't blame that on me, man.
I know. I'm like, oh, man.
That's unfair.
Yeah. Catherine gets what I'm saying.
So the plan is we're just going to sit here in silence until someone has a question. So there we go.
The front of the class. Oh, somebody's studious.
Hi, yeah. Hi, Tong. Nice to see you. I was wondering if maybe you could speak to the role of agriculture in the Hmong story in Minnesota, because you can't go to a farmer's market in the Twin Cities without seeing the undeniable effect that Hmong, farmers have had on the local food landscape here. And, I think that a lot of the Hmong farmers farmed in Laos before the war. And so I wonder if you could speak to agriculture and healing and culture in the Twin Cities.
So I'm going to jump in with just one very small Chinese etymology.
Oh, yeah.
In Chinese, the Chinese people call Hmong people Miao Zu. Miao is the name of the people group. Now, when you look at the Chinese word, which is a pictographic writing system, you have the division of a field, so it's a square with an X or a cross in the middle, 4 plots of land, and you have these little sprouts coming up. That is the name for Hmong people, and it means sprout. They are literally the people of the land making sprouts.
And what's really incredible about that is talking to Li Pao Zhang, professor at Concordia. He talks about how that word is loosely translates as sons of the soil. You know, and it came out as a derogatory term. Like, they're always working out there. They're always, toiling in the soil, But it's a sense of, I wear that with pride. It's like,
which is a very low class in historical Chinese perspective.
Yep, because it's like, the high class people don't work on the field.
They have long fingernails to indicate I don't work in the field.
Yeah. And so from the agricultural side is my mom always says our hearts is in the field. It's buried with the field, and that's how our people is. And I've always asked my parents, like, one of the things that I always ask my parents is like, how do you know how to do this, right? And they're just like, well, you just do. And it's so much part of their life. As simple as like growing up in America, it's like, you go to T-ball, you learn how to, the form of throwing a baseball, and you learn how to, hit a ball. You just do. Or even like riding a bike. Well, you just do. Everyone does it. And so I think that one of the, I always tell this story, and it blows me away of why or how, when it comes to farming, when I say gardening, it makes me think of like the little, the little plot like that's big, and you're like, look, flowers, and I grew tomatoes. I don't call it gardening, it's farming. Like it's a hustle, right? So, for example, my parents, they do about 10 acres a year, and everything that they grow in that 10 acre, they'll harvest it at the year, and they just bring it to the restaurant, or they make me go pick it up. It's like, ugh. I have to come all the way to Hugo? What? No, anyways, and that's what they do. And right now, literally, I was on the phone with my mom this morning, and they're planting right now. They have a bunch of mustard greens going. They have this new corn she wants to try out and everything, right? And so they're rocking it out. They have a bunch of peppers going for us to make her pepper sauce every year she makes for us. So a couple years ago, I was out in their farm area, and I was with them, and I was like, hey, Mom, how come we're not harvesting that section of the field? And my mom goes, oh, no, sweetie, we don't harvest that part. And I'm like, well, it's all like dying out. Maybe we should harvest it. She goes, no, that section, we actually let everything grow, and we let it die so that they can seed. And then we take those seed, and that's for the next generation. Or that's for the next year. And I had this aha moment where I'm like, oh, my gosh, even our people, the way that we look at our lives, the way that we see our culture and our people is the same way we see farming. See, in the Hmong culture, in the Hmong people, they believe that every year, or every generation has to give a little bit of themselves. They have to die a little bit so that there's life for the next generation. So see, my parents and my grandparents, their sacrifice, what they gave, some of them gave up their life. Some of them fought in this war. Some of them suffered through all of this in hopes that the next generation will grow. And I learned that by standing in my mom and dad's garden, watching this being done. Where when I remember I told my mom, I'm like, Mom, can you see this is our people? And it didn't even click to her. She's like, oh yeah, that is what our people do. That every generation has to give up a little bit of themselves. Some of them have to die, and in that death, there's always life.
All right. Any other questions? Here we go in the back. Just a moment.
That was amazing, you guys. That was really, really cool. 2 questions. Yia, in everything that you do and all the restaurants and all the things that you put all of your heart into, what's your favorite thing to cook? So that's going to be question number 1. And then Tong, we heard the story of the grill, like the mind-blowing story of the grill time. What's a food experience that you've had that's like the most important in your life?
I'll start. By the way, Nate back there sounds like you host a show and you interview people too, right, on your show?
I may host a show.
Yeah.
We may have done a show together.
Yeah, we might have a show coming up.
On Thursday. Everybody tune in.
Called Shore Lunch.
Yeah, it's a beautiful shirt you're wearing, by the way.
Oh, wow, yeah. What?
Yeah.
How did that happen?
Excellent.
Yeah, was not planned at all.
Shore Lunch with Nate P. Go ahead and subscribe, like, comment.
Yeah, great show.
I didn't come here to self-promote, though, just so you know.
Not suitable for children because some of the language. I didn't use the language, but no, I was kidding. One of the things that I love cooking the most is like whole fish, grilling a whole fish. I think the reason why too is it connects. You know, it kind of goes back to kind of memories for me. Food always goes back to memory, and it's this thing where like my dad loves eating whole fish, right? So even now, like they're retired and everything, like every time I bring, like my mom would call me and goes, your dad's been hankering for some fish, and I'm like, oh, okay, so I'll go to Coastal and grab some fish, and I'll drive it out to their house, and yeah, and then and my dad would literally like. He'll like sit at the table and my mom would make this beautiful whole fish for him, and then that's just like kind of the joys in life. His favorite thing he loves doing with the whole fish is actually he picks off all the meat for his grandkids. So like they would all sit there, and here's the other thing, man. These kids need to know how to struggle. Let me tell you. So he gets all the little bones out, and he just like, he serves it to them, and I'm like, you know what? That's gonna make you weaker. You gotta swallow some bones. You gotta feel some pain. But because of that, I really love it. Just whole fish over the grill. That was kind of something he taught me. And it's all about finding different kinds of fish that we can, throw over the grill, and any kind of seafood, any kind of shellfish over the grill too. It's super fun, and it becomes this little game. There it's like, okay, like how do we impact this with the most flavor, but not overcook it?
How do you say "let's eat" in Hmong, and what exactly does it mean? Literal translation.
Yep. So "lo nam mo" is let's eat, or come and eat.
And what does it mean, word for word?
Law means come, no ma. Ma means food, or rice. Na means eat.
Yeah, rice.
Yeah.
Ma. You'll see it. I think you see it up there on the sign, right?
I think so.
Or is it in the next one?
Next one. Shh, secret, man.
Shh. Okay, sorry.
You guys didn't hear that?
Can you delete that?
No.
This here. Let me. I love language. I love words. I'm a nerd guy.
You majored in linguistics.
Yes, I did.
So you majored in linguistics in college. Yeah, nerd.
What you're seeing here in these two Chinese characters, so listen carefully here, is the Taiwanese adoption of Chinese characters for the use of pronunciation of Chinese words, Taiwanese words, that doesn't have a writing system. Taiwanese is a language that does not have a writing system, but it lives in proximity with Chinese. And so it has borrowed Chinese characters, which cause the mind of the Taiwanese speaker to say sounds that mimic Chinese sounds so that Taiwanese people can communicate with one another in writing. Does that make sense to you? They're using Chinese characters as phonetic symbols for Taiwanese language. Okay? So in Chinese, we would say, 你吃了没? Have you eaten yet? And in Taiwanese, they would say, 假霸位. 你吃了没? 假霸位. It's kind of, it's quasi similar. And so this here is something I heard 3 times a day. 假崩. Does anyone know what that means? It's the same thing you just said. Eat rice. And it means it's time to eat. It's sui, right? Sui. You call everyone in to come eat. Or the pigs in that example, but so there's not necessarily, there's many dishes, hot pot and making egg rolls and xi fan for breakfast, which is rice porridge with a variety of leftovers from the night before and pickled items and such. But I would say, in my experience, the number one most important food memory or food experience is white rice. There's several, like this is a rice expression. Another one is when you're eating, all the dishes that you're eating, they have one purpose: help you get the rice down. That is the philosophy of eating. I need something to get the rice down. That's the expression, 下饭. Okay, and then the third one would be the last part is an expression, 没饭吃不饱, which means if there's no rice, I cannot get full. You can feed me a burger and a pizza and a huge bowl of pasta, but if there's no rice, I'm not full. If we have not eaten rice, we have not eaten food. So when I married a non-Chinese person, and actually, let me go this direction. Let me go this direction, away from there, right? For one of my earliest memories of understanding how Chinese I was without even understanding was, I was invited to Club Mishahigi, Higgins Lake, Minnesota, or Michigan, excuse me, with a white friend, one of my first white friends that I had in my life. And it was lunchtime at the lake, and his mom brought out a bag of white bread, lettuce, sliced tomatoes, deli meat, ham, and a bag of potato chips. And that was lunch. And my mind was blown away. I had no idea that you could actually eat that for a meal. At first, I almost thought it was a joke. Like, this is a joke, right? To actually have a bag of chips on the dinner table, I couldn't believe it. Because food was always at least one soup, at least one fish, and then at least stir-fried veggies, stir-fried meat, and rice. So the importance of hot rice to the Chinese palate is just unspeakably important.
Amazing.
My wife makes great food.
Thank you. I kind of have to insist. Ming Jin's daughter is here, Pearl. I don't mean to put you on the spot, but do you have any questions? I mean, we kind of spoke at the beginning. If you want to take over. No? Okay. Any other questions? Over here.
Thank you both for inviting us to the table tonight. This discussion was so helpful. Thank you. I have a question for each of you, and for Yi as it relates to the mission of Hilltribe, and for Ming Jin as it relates to interculturality. If you could snap your fingers and make one thing happen, what would that be?
$1
$1 million.
Yeah, make our debt disappear. No, I'm just kidding. We have loans, man.
We have the same answer.
Yeah, we have loans, man. Man, I think this is kind of cheesy, but if I can do it, and I would want to make people more curious, because I think that in our curiosity is where learning grows, right? And because the biggest thing is this: we stunt our learning by saying, "Well, I know this," or we made a conclusion, and in that conclusion, it's like, "Yep, I'm done. Like this, it's already done," and asking the why. That curiosity, well, why? And I think one thing I love is my little nephew, one of my little nephews, always just he always asks me why, you eat that fish, why? And I'm like, because I was hungry. Well, why? Because I didn't eat anything before, dude. And it was always it annoyed me, but then it really made me realize dang, there's just that curiosity, and I think that if we just start, there's a football coach that always told his players, every time we go to practice, every time we get on the practice field, all I need is 1%. I want you to be 1% better. I want you to work on one thing today and be 1% better, because by the time we get to game day, that 1% is going to build to 100%, right? So we're not asking for everyone to have changed hearts, but within our curiosity and the why, I'm just saying ask one question. Just ask one question and be ferociously trying to answer that question, or trying to figure out how to answer that question. And I believe that with food too. And it was something that was so cool to me is, man, I love, one of my buddies, Jamal, he's Ethiopian, and he's a chef, he's a cook, and I get to hang out. When I get to hang out with him, he'll give me something to eat and go, hey, try this, and I will eat it, and I'm like, okay, tell me more about it. Why? Why this? Why is these flavors? And we get talking about this, and we get to talking about his family, we get to talk about his village, we get to talk about these things, all these little things. And it's just, asking one question. Be very curious in asking the whys.
I think in regards, you use the word interculturality. Perhaps I could introduce the term cultivating intercultural agility deeply within yourself. All right? So if I could snap my finger, it would be giving the gift of intercultural agility to everyone. So maybe just as the initial pathway to start there, I would start by asking you, if you could describe culture and you could only use one word, what would it be? My one word is how. Culture answers the question, how do we do this for every single aspect of our life? And it's easy to say, well, my family's been in the U.S. for 7 generations. So we don't really have culture, right? We're not Taiwanese, we're not Hmong. And instead, if we think of culture as the answer to how you greet someone, how you talk to your supervisor versus how you talk to your child. Is there a difference or is there not a difference? We all have culture thick and deep, and it determines every part of how we see and how we react. But so often we begin to think, I'm not looking at life through a cultural lens. I'm looking at life through what's called normal, right? And so take, for instance, I have these glasses that I'm looking at. How often do I look at my glasses? Not that often. When they're dirty, maybe, right? Now I'm looking at my glasses. Right? And yet another way to answer the same question is you are looking at your glasses all day long, because it is by your glasses that you are able to see everything else in this world. How often do I look at my glasses? 100% of the time. In fact, that's really all I see. Everything else is coming through my glasses. And so the first step of cultivating intercultural agility is the awareness that your perspective is profoundly, and that's a deep word, right? Profoundly and broadly cultural.
Very well put. Very well put. Any more questions? We have time for 1 or 2. Over here.
Everyone's supposed to ask a question, right, Ia?
We are real nervous.
I have tasted love in the food, and I'm just curious kind of your thoughts on how it gets there, because I've tasted food that, it's not there and there's such a difference. And so if you could just kind of elaborate on that concept.
When I was teaching at Cooks of Crocus Hill, the one thing that I was just horrible at is writing recipes.
Yeah.
I just could not, for the life of me, write a recipe. And I write professionally. And what occurred to me is that the way I learned to cook was not through recipes, but through relationship. My relationship with my family is how I learned to cook. And Salt's relationship with meat is a relationship. You can't always just say 1 pound of this ingredient needs this quantity of another ingredient. So maybe the translation of love is I care deeply about you, and so I care deeply about what I'm making for you. And that relationship is going to inform the relationship between my ingredients. And maybe that's what tastes like love.
Yeah. We've talked about this many times. I think that you coined this phrase of it's not about recipe, it's about relationship. And when I done Cooks of Crocus Hill, I've done The Good Acre, when you're kind of have like a half semi pop-up growing up, you had to hustle other ways, and teaching a lot of cooking classes is no, I'm just kidding. And I think that the biggest thing that I found when people were frustrated was, well, how many tablespoons of garlic do I put in? And I would be like, well, how much do you love garlic? Oh, I really love garlic. How much do you want to put in? I don't know. You know, because I think that that a lot of some people, when it comes to cooking or food, they think there's a right or wrong, right? There's a right or there's a wrong. And what if I told you that there wasn't? I think to me that the most incredible thing is, as humans, we always talk about our independence. Don't tell me what to do. I am independent. I can do whatever I want. But then when it comes to some of these classes, it was like, tell me what to do. One of the greatest things I've learned was when I was teaching at the Good Acre. They had camp, right? Nikki was at camp or something for the children. Yeah. So I think the ages were like 10 to. Nikki works for the Good Acre. That's why I'm asking her. Like 10 to 12 or something like that was the age range, or 8 to 12. And there was these kids that came in and did like a full week of cooking class with us for like the week of camp, right? One of the greatest things I learned being around these children is that they weren't afraid to fail. By the end of that week, they did roasted spatchcock chicken. They roasted a spatchcock chicken, right? And they did like roasted potatoes in there, and they did, all these like little sauces and everything like that. And their parents came in at the end to pick them up, and like the one girl was so cute. It's so funny because she didn't really talk much, because she was like 12 and she was like too cool for school. But I saw her like carve up that chicken and kind of hide it a little bit. And she came up to me. She goes, "Hey, is it okay if I take this to my mom when she comes picks me up?" I'm like, "Absolutely, go ahead," because she was just so proud of it, right? But here's the deal. I did that same class with adults, like grown adults who like have college education and can drive and and all that stuff and read and write, right? And they were so scared to cut the backs off the chicken for the spatchcocking. They were like, "What do I do?" One of them, oh man, I felt really bad. I'm gonna just say she cut the front off, and she's just like, "My back looks weird." I'm like, "Dude, you just went through like the front part." And she's like, "What?"
Reverse spatchcock.
Yeah.
Believe in it. I love that method, actually.
But that wasn't the point of the class. But
you learned something for free.
Yeah. But one of the things was they were so afraid. They were so scared to make a mistake, right? As adults, because we've been told like, okay, if one wrong move and it's all. But watching these kids, they just daringly went to it, and if it was a mistake, they're just like, "Oh, cool." And so when it talks about having love in the food and your cooking, I think people are so driven by these recipes that it's got to be exactly like this, because why? It's performance. Because you only follow recipes when people are coming over, right? Most people I know, it's like, "Hey, I have this recipe. We're going to do this recipe. We're hosting people." So it's a performance. I don't want to fail. But what if I told you that people coming over and you're hosting them, it's not about the food. It's about the company. It's about being with them. What if I told you that it wasn't about a performance? What if I told you that you have this ability to sit with people and eat? My dad would say this to us, and I always go back to my dad's statement. He said, "The war took so many lives. So many of us died, and so many pain, that all we really wanted was to sit with our brothers and sisters around the table and eat." So it's not about getting the recipe right, because that is just a guideline. It's about the relationship, and not just the relationship with the food, but the relationship with the people that are coming, dining with you. And when people say, "Oh, the secret ingredient is love," the secret ingredient is love. It is. It is the willingness to say that this, Nikki's coming over and we're eating. This is more important than me getting this roast right. And if it is a little off, whatever. But hey, we get to sit together across the table and eat together. I think that we missed the part. I think we missed it. And the reason why is we're so enamored by making sure that the image is right? Because you want that good picture, you want this, you want this. What if I told you that it wasn't about any of that it was about being able to sit across the table from people, And then the love that goes in the food comes from this is how much I care about you. And I call it is the simple act of grace. My auntie told me that in Laos, when they were, back in the day, 50, 60 years ago, they would travel, and it would be from village to village. And when you're trying to go to the big city, you would cross all these little Hmong villages, right? And you would be so thirsty because you walk 8-7 hours a day to get to the big city where you can sell something to make a little money. And when you come through the village, there's bucket of water. Every house has this little bucket of water. in the simple act of grace, as a stranger walks through, you say, Lahode. Dicho Lahode means come and drink some water. Here, a cup of water. And that simple act of grace of a stranger coming through, next time when they come through, they know that that's where I can get at least a cup of water. And to me, that's what it is. So even in a cup of water, there's the love that goes into it.
Folks, put your hands together for these two guys. I think that's a great place to cap it. I really appreciate all of you coming tonight. This has been such a surreal experience. We've been wanting to do this for a while, and we're so glad that we're finally able to execute on this incredible vision of pushing Hmonglish even forward and, you know, having these conversations take place in front of a live audience. I think that's just such an incredible thing to do, especially with the Q&A aspect. So we're going to have our DJ Brian kick off some vibes a little bit more. You guys can hang out and socialize, but that's the end of Hmonglish. Do you guys have anything else to say?
Yeah, do you have anything? I got one thing to wrap everything.
Go ahead.
So, No. So, hey, this is our last event to wrap up AAPI month for us. We had a bunch of events through. So thank you so much for being a part of it. It's super fun just to kind of do all these little different things. Carlin, she's in the back. Carlin's our special events coordinator, so she's had to work with me where I'm like thinking stuff, and I'm like, Carlin, why can't you just like read my mind and know what I'm thinking? So she's the one who's organized, put everything together. We kind of joke, so. I kind of jokingly told her where I'm like, hey, now we know how to do all this stuff now, you know, and next time we'll do it better. So again, if you follow us, if you see what we're doing, we're probably going to repeat some of these things again because it's been so fun. So thank you so much.
Thank you, guys.
Feel free to hang out, grab a drink if you want. Brian's going to be playing some music, and we just chill.
Just hang out, guys. Thank you.
One more time for everybody. And again, one more big round for Matt, you guys. And give yourselves a huge round of applause. Thank you guys so much for coming and hanging out with us this evening. I hope you guys learned a lot and loved a lot tonight. So thank you guys.